Welcome to a special edition of Chargers Talk 4630 as we recap what took place during the Chargers' first preseason game. I'm your host, Stacey Mallory, and if this is your first time here, I welcome you and ask that you follow this podcast by pressing on the subscribe button. It is free. This is not a paid subscription. This way, you'll be notified whenever this podcast goes on live or release the latest content. You can also follow and listen while you're on the road, at work, or even on your lunch break on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts, Pandora, Deezer, and TuneIn Radio. You can also check out some hot topics involving the Chargers on stormcloud.blog, which is run by our own Kyle D. So yesterday's first preseason game was pretty rough. Even though it was just the first preseason game, there were many fans that was excited and couldn't wait to see what this team, led by Jim Harbaugh and the great coaching staff that was assembled, looked like in a live game. Well, last night was our first peek at what it looks like, and it wasn't good by no stretch of the imagination. We shouldn't have expected a lot, but we expected better play than what we saw, especially from Easton Stick. Let me play you a little clip of what I said last week on this podcast, explaining my thoughts on Easton Stick going into his first preseason game. I also mentioned one of the things I was sour on was no depth was built behind Justin Herbert. So my biggest worry is what happens if Justin has to miss some significant time? Are we okay with Max Duggan and Easton Stick, who both are Tom Telesco picks? I don't want to press the panic button right now because I think it's way too early. If Justin getting injured early, or as Harbaugh like to say, going through something this early in camp, he could possibly be just fine for game one and go out there and play at a high level against the Raiders and possibly win. But what if this lingers? It's a fair conversation to have as Charger fans who inboxed me and called me to have these conversations this past week. There were 66 different quarterbacks who started games in the National Football League last season. 66. So that tells you how often quarterbacks get injured and how important it is to have a backup that can come in and win maybe 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5 if necessary. Now, I'm sorry, but I know some don't like to hear it, but in my opinion, and even though there's only a small sample size, I have not seen anything in Max Duggan or Easton Stick's game that makes me confident should Justin need more time to heal beyond camp. Now, before I get into the horrible play of Easton Stick, let me remind you of the people that didn't suit up for this game because that really matters. Justin Herbert, Gus Edwards, Joshua Palmer, Denzel Perriman, Darius Davis, Cam Hart, Junior Colson, J.K. Dobbins, Ben Mason, Khalil Mack, Jamari Salyer, Bradley Bozeman, Joey Bosa, and Derwin James. Those are all some very significant names and impactful players. So we didn't expect them to be in rare form as they would when the season started, but we definitely expected a whole lot better than what we got. I've mentioned this countless times and even wrote an article about not expecting much from Easton Stick because when his opportunity came, he did very little. I never saw anything in Easton Stick game that makes me think he will have much success in this league. The Chargers drafted him in the 5th round 5 years ago, and he's currently on a 1-year extension he signed that ends next season. He finished his night through halftime going 5 of 13 with 32 passing yards, 1 interception, and 1 rush for 11 yards. And that came almost at the end, maybe 2.5 minutes left at halftime. Trust me, it was worse than those stats look. He had a passer rating of 14.6. He threw a pass over the middle that Hayden Hurst had to torque his body just to get a hand on it and took a huge hit that shook him up. The pass was unfortunately intercepted and Hurst's night was over. That was the kind of dangerous throw that will piss your receivers off because you leave them vulnerable to take the kind of hit that Hayden took. He was shaken up but appeared to be okay by halftime, but that could have been a lot worse. Easton Stick is a professional football player in the National Football League, so there's no excuses, and it's totally unacceptable for even a backup quarterback to be this bad in a game that was Harbaugh's first coaching game at home in SoFi. So I don't want to hear any more excuses about the Easton Stick experiment. It's over. It was a terrible performance, and thank you again, Tom Telesco. That's your guy. Even with Harbaugh, Greg Roman, and Shane Day teaching this guy, that's the best version of who you are. Easton Stick been practicing with the ones since Herbert got injured, and all reports were coming back that the offense constantly was stalling and can't move the ball. There was no chemistry on the offensive side of the ball, and we saw that last night. There's a lot of work that has to be done if our depth is going to be improved, where we can sustain injuries as they come, because we all know they will. The offensive line wasn't bad. Alt got beat on one play out of 14 pressures. That's going to happen to the best from time to time. But overall, he was good. Special teams was pretty good for the most part. I think Jalen Gill was impressive with a couple of good returns where he almost broke a few last night. Cameron Dicker was doing Cameron Dicker things. He's a hell of a kicker, even though I don't want to see him in there making tackles on special teams. That was a pretty hard collision, and although he made the tackle, he is too valuable to lose to injury. Max Duggan wasn't all that better coming in for Easton Stick. I haven't been impressed by him either. But Luis Perez, who just got to the team, was more in control of this offense and made some decent throws, which was something Stick or Duggan couldn't do when they had their opportunity. And he hasn't been there long enough to even know the playbook. So maybe we have something in Paris where we can continue to groom him to be at least third on the depth chart behind Herbert. This team did not address the depth behind Justin Herbert, and you got to see it on full display last night. Ryan Tannehill, keep your cell phone close by because Joe Ortiz may be calling you soon. Jared Patterson, the running back, he showed some flashes in the run game later on, and the defense didn't play bad at all. They were on the field way too long as the Chargers offense went 3 and out, I believe, in their first 4 possessions without even a first down. Tui Tulopu and Bud Dupree was getting pressure a lot in the first quarter, but overall, Jesse Minter gotta like what he saw the first game. And of course, there's still some things they need to clean up, but I think this defense is going to be a lot better than people think. So the Chargers have a disappointing preseason opener, dropping the first game to the Seattle Seahawks 16-3. I got a feeling these guys going to have a tough few days of practice this week with Harbaugh after that performance. Well, we'll be back Thursday to preview next Saturday's game against the Rams at SoFi, and hopefully we should see improvements after this dud we had against the Seahawks. So that was my thoughts on the game from Saturday night. And that ends this segment of Chargers Talk 4630. Don't forget to go to stormcloud.blog to check out more content covering the Chargers, as well as other great topics from other bloggers that's on that site as well. We thank you, the viewer, for always tuning in, engaging with us in the chat room with your comments and your questions. We're great with you, but we're nothing without you. If you joined us for the first time, like the content here, and want to support our community, please don't forget to follow us by clicking on the subscribe button. It is not a paid subscription. It is free. You can also follow and listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to share this podcast with someone who may not have tuned into us yet. And I can't say enough about how much we appreciate you as well as your support. Until then, be safe, be well, be good. Enjoy the rest of your day. And as always, bolt up.